Harcum has been committed to providing women and men with the education and life skills that they need to succeed in their professions and in the wider world. Today, we are delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Elizabeth Elizardi. Mrs. Elizardi holds a very interesting degree, Applied Positive Psychology. Today, she will help us better understand the meaning and the value of living a full life. In preparation for this lecture, I actually took the survey. I took the strengths survey. It was very interesting. It surprised me. Many of the things I thought, gee, I should have been here, I thought, but they all were good. Elizabeth will reference in her presentation things about my strengths survey. She has her perfect and best strength is love of learning, which is evident in her biography, not just for the advanced education she has pursued, but also her field of choice, which is education administration. She is currently the Laura School Director at Agnes Irwin School. As a blogger for Psychology Today, she has an international forum to share her observations as well as her insights. She also shared a top strength that the two of us share together, and that is gratitude. So in the spirit of gratitude, we're happy to have her here, Mrs. Elizabeth Elizardi, and we are exceedingly grateful for your willingness to share your observations on how to better care for our lives and live a better life. At this time, I am honored, and it gives me much pleasure to introduce to you Elizabeth Elizardi.
Thank you for that introduction, Margie and Jean, and thank you, Harcum, for welcoming me to your Eye on Caring series. Wow, I think everybody should present at one point so you can hear all these wonderful things about yourself. Right? I had no idea. And I hope to just offer you a little piece of what it is that you heard today in that introduction. So I was thinking about this presentation and I thought, oh no, I think that maybe the title of my presentation was a little misleading as I was thinking about its title, How to Live a Full Life. Because what I immediately think of when I think of being full is like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and that feeling of not knowing how to stop yourself, and then all of a sudden you have that food baby. Has that ever happened to you? Okay, I see some head nods. And it feels like too much. It feels like you've stuffed yourself and you don't have any room for anything else. So, well, certainly I think we can use the word full to describe what we're going to be talking about today. I thought that perhaps a better way to look at our time together today was thinking about living well. So I always like to start my presentations, and I also want to tell you that I'm using Prezi, and if you've never seen Prezi before, it zooms in really quickly, so it might take a minute to get used to that. I always like to know who's in the room. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about me, so that you can know me better. So if I were to describe for you my identity molecule, I would share with you parts of my identity such as I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. I'm a daughter. I'm a granddaughter. By the way, two very strong-willed women who still live in their homes in South Philadelphia. So that's a good sign for me. I'm a white woman. I am a doctoral student at Louisiana State University studying positive youth development. And I'm the director of the lower school at the Agnes Irwin School. So you have to understand that my days sometimes are standing in front of 4 to 10-year-olds talking to them about character strengths, which gives me a great sense of purpose. So it's a welcome shift to be here with you today. But I've often wondered, how is it that we come to know about self-care? How is it that we come to know about how to take care of ourselves? So what I would want for you to know about me is that my journey through self-care is a journey that was in some ways about self-preservation. So I leave for you this quote to take in. I would add to my identity that yes, I am a daughter and I'm a sister. I'm the youngest of 4 girls, and there we are, standing, pointing to the place where we grew up. So while some, I think, grow up learning about self-care as a way of taking care of yourself perhaps as a luxury, I think someone described it, wasn't always a luxury for me and for my family. So for me, self-care is very personal because I learned about it in really authentic ways. I think I would describe my life as a life of maybes when it comes to self-care. So maybe I could sleep in a warm bed and enjoy a nice, luxurious Saturday morning. But maybe I would have the blankets pulled off of me and a mother telling me to get out of bed because it was time to do some chores. Maybe there was enough in our house for me to wash my clothes, but maybe all that I had to choose from was the dish detergent that was in the sink. Maybe when I sat down to eat a bowl of breakfast, there was a carton of milk in the refrigerator. But maybe all there was iced tea, and that's what I could drink with my cereal. Maybe we could buy the brightly colored labeled boxes in the grocery store, but maybe most of the time we were buying the Pathmark No Frills black and white box. And maybe I could sometimes feel the warm affection of my mother, but most of the time I did not. So you see, I want to draw that picture for you because, again, I think that self-care is really personal and we learn about it in really authentic ways. So now that you know a little bit about me and my journey through self-care and how I ended up with this as such a priority for me in my life, I want to hear about you. So I hope, you know I'm an educator, so you know I like to play games. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do something for me. So this is a little game called Stand Up If. Okay, and when I say a phrase, if it applies to you, you got to stand up. Okay, and let people know who's in the room. So the first statement that I'll throw out to you is, stand up if you woke up today. Oh, very good. You got the rules. It was a little bit of a trick question. Okay, you can have a seat. Thank you. Stand up if you moved your body today. Okay? Stand up if you connected with a friend. Nice. Make sure that you look around the room and see how we're taking care of ourselves. Stand up if you read something that inspired you. Stand up if you talked to a stranger. Stand up if you ate a nutritious meal or snack. Stand up if you purchased something just a little bit extra for yourself today. Okay, there we go.
Ice cream.
And stand up if today you would say you engaged in some form of self-care. Great, wonderful, have a seat. Thank you for sharing in that moment with me. It gives me a sense of who we have in the room. So tell me again, or share in a moment with me again, if you had to, well, first of all, I'm going to ask you to do something again. Close your eyes. There we go. And I want you to picture the first image that comes to mind when you think about self-care. Okay, what is the first image that comes to your mind when you think about self-care? And just hold it there. Okay, now open your eyes. Look at a stranger, or maybe someone that you don't know in the room, and share what was in your head.
What? Bubble bath.
Bubble bath.
What do you do? A bubble bath? Seriously? I didn't know men took bubble bath. You're lying.
That's my wife. I use baby bubble bath. And I sit there for hours. Until I put really screen and I let it until it's not hot. I just lay there, it's relaxing.
You didn't even have to do I need to do my teacher clap? Okay. What did you hear? Shout it out.
Bath. Bubble bath.
Sleep. Breathing. Massage. Swimming. Say that again. Warm and fuzzy. Warm and fuzzy.
Riding a motorcycle.
Wonderful. It's great to know what comes into your mind when you think about self-care, and it's interesting because some of the things that you mentioned are very similar to some of the things that I hear from my upper schoolers in the class that I'm teaching on positive psychology. It's kind of what is it that we think of quickly in our heads when we think about taking care of ourselves. We're going to talk about some of the things that you mentioned just now and where they fall in this idea of self-care. But first, I wonder, did anybody think of people? So when we think about self-care, sometimes we think about the people who send us these messages about how to take care of ourselves. And of course, we know we're living in the day and age where that we can't avoid it. It's in front of us all the time. But what I think is important to know is that wellness, the word wellness and self-care, sometimes they use those interchangeably because self-care is a part of a wellness model or a wellness initiative. It really just began to enter our lexicon in about the 1950s. And the reason why that is because our population was changing. And scientists and researchers began to study our demands of our population, specifically about health-related initiatives, and realized, we've got to be doing something different in order to take care of our ever-changing population, ever-developing population. And so when they began to realize that more people were dying from diseases, then there became a real emphasis on wellness. But it's interesting to think about that. If you think back to 1979, Dan Rather, in a 60 Minutes interview, he was interviewing someone about wellness, and the words that he used were wellness. Well, that's not a word that you hear every day. And we think about where we are now, and I think we would agree that it's definitely something that we hear every day, if not most days. So here are some people that you might recognize. Ashley Graham. Ashley Graham has come out as a wonderful spokesmodel for body image and what it means. She's a plus-size model. She has great messages that she sends out to the world. Reese Witherspoon, she brings people together through her book clubs and a lot of the messages that she sends through the books that she reads. Lizzo. Do we all know Lizzo? Okay, if you don't know Lizzo, you need to listen to her music because she has some powerful messages to share with all of us. One of my favorite songs of hers is called Soulmate. If you don't know Soulmate, she talks about, I am my own soulmate. That's all I ever need. And then Oprah, who has been traveling around the country and recently, but has always shared messages for us about how we can take care of ourselves. And then last and certainly most importantly, Drew Brees. Because I was just trying to find a way to get Drew Brees into this presentation. I am so proud of myself because I did it, but who doesn't love Drew? If you don't know, I moved from New Orleans this past summer. My husband is a native New Orleanian, and so I have a lot of love in my heart for Drew and the Saints, but he also is a real icon and a paragon of teaching kids and teaching all of us really good things about strengths and strengths of character. So here we are. It's Self-Care 2020. It looks a little bit different than it did 70 years ago. We have the people who are influencers who are telling us how to take care of ourselves, and we also have this wonderful sense of information and media that is passed on to us. So programs like Instagram, if you were to Google self-care, or guess you can't Google self-care on Instagram, if you were to search self-care on Instagram, you would see 23.9 million posts. So people are really eager for this information and really wanting to know what this means. In fact, you can do things like follow the official Sad Ghost Club. And the official Sad Ghost Club will post little reminders for us during the day. So if you're having a moment, the Sad Ghost will tell you that sometimes just a little bit of a change of scenery, just little things through your day that can kind of pop up. But this is the world that we're living in. Twitter. So those of you who are on Twitter may know that likewise Twitter has about 200 posts an hour that are hashtagged for self-care. Okay. There are things that you can do for self-care on Twitter. This is one. It is called Tiny Care Bot. And Tiny Care Bot will just show up in your feed and tell you, please drink a bit of water. So if you didn't remember to do so, you just remember to drink some water. Sometimes it's the little things. And then, of course, we have the World Wide Web, which it's interesting to note that the term self-care as a search word has reached a 5-year peak on Google searches and was at its highest peak days after the 2016 national election, presidential election. Very interesting that it's at a 5-year high. We might need it again. It might spike, like ways that we can't predict, right? But it's good for you to know that the self-care is an industry. Okay? It has been commodified. Some of you mentioned things when you were talking about those words. You mentioned massage, you mentioned beach, you mentioned other images that come to mind that the industry has said, ooh, this is what people are looking for, what they need, so we're going to capitalize on this and commodify it. Now it is a $10 billion industry. Pretty amazing that is where we are. So millennials are now at a point where they spend twice as much on self-care as baby boomers. Wow. So millennials have really led the self-care movement. 22% of a person's disposable income on average a year is what they spend on non-essential items. So things that you do to treat yourself, those extras that were mentioned a little bit earlier. And what we know about millennials is that they have spent more time on self-improvement than any other generation. So they're hungry for knowledge, and they aren't willing to do things the same way, and they really see self-care as their revolution. So what that tells us, and why we need it, why do we need self-care? Because to live means that you suffer. Okay? Living is suffering. This is the first noble truth of Buddhism. To live means to suffer. What self-care helps us understand is that we don't have to suffer because of our suffering. So the more that we accept that life is suffering, the less we will suffer from it. So you may wonder, well, why is it that, how do we get here where we kind of have this self-care revolution, this boom in this generation? And so I want to share with you just some statistics. that you're probably already aware of, but I think when you hear them out loud, it kind of really draws the distinction between where we were then and where we are now. So our suicide rate, over a 16-year period from 2001 to 2017, increased by 31%. Okay? 90% of Generation Z, so those are our youth right now, report feeling depressed or sad on a daily basis. Okay? There was a recent Economist article from February of a year ago that was titled, "Gen Z is stressed, depressed, and exam obsessed." Okay? I have a Gen Zer, I know. That actually is an accurate description. 2018 Pew poll, 70% of 13 to 17-year-olds thought anxiety and depression are a major concern among their peers. So things that we used to see like teen pregnancy, drug use, those are now rank ordered lower on the list than depression and anxiety. In 2016, NIH released some results from a poll. 16.2 million Americans ages 18 to 25 experienced a depressive episode in the last year. Okay? 59% of women are now in the workforce. So when we look at family system, our family systems have changed. Okay? Women are worked 59% now, is 20% in 1960. A significant difference. So as family systems change, as women are coming out of the house, there are more educational opportunities, there are greater demands on our time. And lastly, when we look at work hours, I think we know where we are compared to other countries, but U.S. is the only country without a national paid parental leave benefit. The average in other countries is 12 weeks. The International Labor Organization has shown that Americans work 137 more hours than the Japanese in a year, 260 more than the Brits, and 499 more than the French, okay, in a year. So if you think about productivity and you take those numbers, and you take our work week, our average work week in America, it would take a quarter of our current work week, or about 11 hours, to meet the standard of living that we had in the 1950s. So think of your work week and think about a quarter of that week, 11 hours. If you work 11 hours, you'd be reaching that standard of living that people were reaching or expecting to reach in the 1950s. Pretty staggering, right? It's pretty staggering. So with all of that being said, I wonder, this is where we can end up, right? We can end up with, and by the way, this is from, I'm trying to get this off because I want to come out and talk to you. This is from a wonderful form of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. And the author of that framework explains what it is that we're experiencing in 2020 as a drain. Okay, we feel disconnected. We feel reactive. We feel avoidant. We're inside of our minds or our heads, and we're neglecting our values. And the overarching reason for this is because we're being guided by expectations instead of being guided by our values. So when we wake up, Brene Brown talks about this so eloquently. When we go to bed every night, we're putting our head down on the pillow and we're thinking, what didn't I get done? Oh, I forgot to send that email. I meant to call that friend. I meant to put the laundry in the dryer, whatever it might be. And we're putting our heads down at night and we're thinking, we didn't do enough. And we're waking up in the morning and we're thinking, we didn't do enough. Right? So it's the scarcity complex that we are living in, and it's causing this drain. It's causing us to feel this way. So when all of this is put together, it disconnects us from each other, and it disconnects us from ourselves. Okay? We're kind of all walking around in our own little individual bubbles. So I'm wondering from you, on a scale of 0 to 5, we call this in the elementary world or the education world a fist to 5, and sometimes this is how we get a live vote. If you had to do a fist to 5, and fist meaning, if I were to look at my day-to-day, I don't incorporate a lot of self-care routines, to 5, I practice self-care every day and I do it deliberately. Where would you end up? If you could just kind of put a hand in the air, fist to 5. Okay. How frequently or how do you prioritize, how much do you prioritize self-care? Are you a, Are you a, okay. So just maybe look around the room and just see where we end up. It's very interesting. So before we get started on this journey of talking about strategies, practical strategies, it's important for us to talk about what self-care is and what it isn't, because there are lots of different definitions for it. So count of 3, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to shout out something. We Actually, research shows that cussing actually is a really good form of self-care. I have read a research article about that, and every so often, we had last week, or the week before, the nurse in the lower school texted me that there was an accident on 95 and that she was stuck and it wasn't moving, and there was somebody else on the text chain, and they said, oh, just breathe. And I wanted to text back, just cuss. No one can hear you. Again, self-care is personal, right? So the word that I want you to call out, we thought about images or we visualized what was in our head. Now I want you to think about that word. If I were to kind of go around and say, name what word comes to mind when you think about self-care. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, what did we hear? What did you hear your partner say? Or the person around you said?
I heard nature. Someone said
Tennis?
nature.
Tennis?
Nature. Someone said
Nature?
Pampering.
Necessary pampering. Soft? Is that what I heard? Fleeting. Meditation. Reading and fleeting, right? Meditation. Friends.
Ice cream.
Always ice cream.
I recently asked the lower school students about what happiness is, and one of them said ice cream.
It's true.
They're right.
It's with us. I know. Very interesting. Okay. So here are the 3 definitions that I'm going to propose, the 3 ways for us to think about self-care. Self-care is a proactive effort to live well and live long. Living well and living long. It's proactive. What does that mean? You have to do it, right? It involves action, active. It's an active process. Self-care is a task of self-direction toward wellness. It's just one of the cogs in the wheel. It's just one of the spokes of the wheel in a wellness model. It's not everything, but it's something. And by doing it, and doing it in self-directed ways, you have cultural differences between New Orleans and here. Okay, so it can be geographically, there can be differences in self-care. I will tell you that there is a festival it feels like every week, but at least every month in New Orleans, right? And some people would say that's a form of self-care, going out, connecting with people, hearing live music, being engaged in their community. So it can be cultural. It can also be generational, as we've discussed. Baby boomers may have a very different understanding or affiliation with self-care than a Gen Z or a millennial will. Again, it may be has something to do with, I think, what
Thank you.
how work has changed over time in those generations. But we do know that by engaging in self-care, that this is what we can expect: an improved mood, less anxiety, creativity, greater productivity, better decision-making. This is what the research is telling us. There are incredible researchers out there doing amazing work around the country. Mara Mathur is a USC professor. She is studying how stress affects memory, and so a lot of her research is about better decision-making in her emotion and cognition lab. And Kelly McGonigal, who's one of my academic crushes, is at Stanford, and she studies stress. She wrote a book called The Upside of Stress. So again, going back to that idea of, we know that life is stressful, we know that life is suffering, but we have to look at stress in a different way. Actually, a healthy amount of stress is good for your body. We're primed for that. But what Kelly McGonigal's research shows us is that what matters most about stress is our mindset about stress. So she says, what you expect is what you get. Okay, so if you expect something to be stressful, it will be stressful. And you will make the decision, again, going back to that idea of self-actualization, you will decide if a certain situation is going to induce biological courage or stress, the upside of stress or the downside of stress. These are important people doing important work in the field. Can we agree that we all want these things? Improved mood, less anxiety, greater productivity. I think we can all agree. But what we need to be aware of is some assumptions about self-care. This is where I'm going to unpack, I think, some of the myths that are currently out there about self-care. One of them is that we are okay as we are. We just need to take care of ourselves. And so self-care is just about caring for ourselves as we are right now. The second is about the lie of self-sufficiency. David Brooks talked about this eloquently in a recent TED Talk as he described what was a very lonely period in his life. I mean, he talked about how he felt like, as long as I've got it all, I'm good, and how he learned about how that's just a simple lie. And typically, I think we use self-care as an intervention, and we've got it wrong. So we're going to talk about how to get it right. So here's that first assumption about self-care, that we're okay just as we are, we just need to take care of ourselves. So another way to look at it is that actually we're not, that self-care coupled with self-awareness equals self-love. Self-care plus self-awareness equals self-love. And the self-awareness piece is where we begin to talk about ourselves as objects versus ourselves as subjects. So when we are an object, if we have self-care without self-awareness, we're not aware of ourselves, then maybe our world is about Uber Eats, right? Like we kind of have a lot of luxuries in our lives. Like I can I can be at home. I don't have to be very active. I can be a very passive object that is manipulated and acted upon, and I don't have to do much to be taken care of. Okay, so maybe it's like the Uber Eats generation. Or maybe it's the idea of deserving. I deserve better. Okay. This word really bothers me, and I'm just going to put that out there, and I've been trying to work through that in my head. Why does this word bother me so much when someone says, I deserve this, or you deserve that? Well, I don't really know if that's true. I mean, so I'll tell you a little funny story. I actually had this conversation with my daughters the other day because my 9th grader is obsessed with Harry Styles, and he was recently mugged outside of a bar, and then his ex-girlfriend had died. And so my daughter was saying, it's just so sad what's been happening to Harry. And, okay, this is a 15-year-old, okay? So sad what's happening to Harry, and I mean, he got mugged, and then he, his ex-girlfriend died. He just doesn't deserve that. I said, does anyone deserve that? I mean, okay, it's Harry Styles, but let's just talk about that word, deserve. So this idea of deserving, of that I don't need to do much, I can kind of exist as this object that will kind of bring things in, but I don't have to do much that is beyond me to make things happen, is something that we might consider as a way of looking at self-care differently. The second idea of that self-care, that the lie of self-sufficiency, is one that has certainly been proven wrong, and one of the most powerful ways it has been proven wrong is through the longest study on happiness that exists. And that is the Harvard study of adult development. Does anybody know about that? A really incredible study. George Valiant, who was one of my professors at Penn, is someone who has worked with that study. But basically, it started in 1938. There were about 724 men who were at Harvard at the time who began to participate. About 60 men who are still in their 90s are alive today. Every 2 years they are surveyed, and they are also interviewed. By their family members are interviewed, and so they are surveyed on their overall happiness, life satisfaction, depressive symptoms, things like that. And what we have learned is that the best predictor at the age of 80 is not wealth or professional success, but it's the strength of that person's relationships at the age of 50. So a lie of self-sufficiency is that we can stay disconnected and stay alone, and that won't have an impact on our well-being and our happiness. Research is telling us otherwise. And even Pope Francis told us lately on this tweet. And if you are of a different faith, you can substitute that word in that last sentence for something else. But even he says, we alone cannot satisfy ourselves. We need to unmask our self-sufficiency, overcome our closures, go back to being small within, be simple and enthusiastic, filled with fervor and love for others. So people are on to this, that this is much more about relationships and social connections than it is just about us as objects. So here they are, our 3 assumptions. And then lastly, what I will share is that this idea that self-care is an intervention. Okay. Was talking about this earlier today. So here's the big idea that I hope that you walk away with today. That self-care, many times for us, is about trying to get rid of something. Get rid of stress. Get rid of anxiety. Get rid of sadness. Okay, we're trying to get rid of negative emotions or our negative states. And we intervene. We intervene with things like a bath, a massage, a manicure and pedicure, a phone call with a friend, a walk outside, which are all really great things and important things. But what positive psychology would tell us is that it's not about getting rid of, but it's about adding to. So we need to flip the script on self-care so that it becomes less about an intervention, that when these things go wrong, when things go wrong in our lives, we suddenly have to take care of ourselves. I've lost someone close to me. I've lost a pet. I didn't meet a goal at work and had a hard conversation with my boss. I broke up with a partner. I hurt myself, or someone that I love hurt myself. Okay, all these things, and then we think, it's time for me to take care of myself, when in fact we should be taking care of ourselves every single day, even when we're feeling really good. Rhonda Cornum, who is a major in the Army, came to speak at Penn when the Penn Resiliency Program was partnering with the Army to, partnering with the Army to create the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program. So I don't know if any of you know that, but our current soldiers are trained in resiliency, and they're trained by a team of people from Penn. And so they created this global assessment tool called the GAT, and soldiers now take it as part of their basic training. And then they receive resiliency training as part of their program. But when Rhonda Cornum came to speak to us, she said, when we wake up, when you're in the Army and you're part of a battalion or a group, you wake up every morning and you know what your plan is to stay physically healthy. Okay? You have a regimen. You have to run this, you do that. It's like going to CrossFit. You have all of your stations. And she said, but we should be doing the same thing with our psychological health. So we should be waking up every day and thinking, what do I need to do to stay psychologically healthy? And that's what has evolved over time. From the 1950s to now, what started off as wellness and self-care is about physical health is now about wellness, is about psychological health, because we're learning new things about neuroscience that are really important to know. So what does it look like to promote self-care? Let's see. So I'll go back. I put these three up here because this right here is the core of any good wellness model. Any good wellness program has promotion, prevention, and intervention. Okay, so let's think about a program that might be part of an institution. Like Jean was talking to me about discipline in schools. Okay, so important, right? I think we can all agree on that. What does it look like to promote behavior in schools? What does it look like? What does it look like to promote good behavior in schools? Right, so you might model like you have core values as an institution, you have your school rules, you may have assemblies where you bring people together and you can re-norm around those values, so we promote it, okay? We may have ways of writing notes to our children. One thing that we do at Irwin's is the teachers have a postcard that has all of our values around a border, and anytime that they see a girl modeling one of the values, they write a note, and it's a postcard, and it's mailed home. So the girl sees it in her mailbox and can read about it. That's a promotion strategy. What does it look like to prevent inappropriate behavior in a school? Okay, so you may build relationships. Okay, I think about things like coaching around really effective classroom management strategies. So when you have a teacher who really has really strong classroom management, okay, they can pick up on things just at the point where it's about to tip. Okay, they can kind of redirect and move in a new direction. Okay, that might be prevention. And what does intervention look like? Say it again?
It's after the fact, so it's like you've done, you redirect. After it happened, you redirect it, you reinforce something that was positive.
Right, so it's a consequence of some sort, right? Like you intervene, and it may be a conversation with a teacher, it could be a conversation with the principal, it could be a consequence, a call home. Okay, so this is the approach of any good wellness program, and we spend most of our time in intervention, and we need to be spending most of our time in promotion. So this is an example of what it looks like as a country to take on this work. So this is the country of Bhutan, and in 2008, they decided, we're going to move away from focusing on GDP, and instead we're going to focus on gross national happiness. So they have a whole gross national happiness initiative, and these are the 4 pillars of that initiative that their prime minister has taken on. And certainly there's work in other countries as well that promotes the good stuff. So I think many of you may know about the Prime Minister of Finland, who recently had shared that she believed she wanted to look at a 4-day work week and just kind of propose that. Like, people need to spend more time with their families. Now, the government did not move forward with that initiative, but it's interesting that they even considered it. But there was, I thought, what I found is that there was a 1996 law in Finland that allowed employees the right to adjust their hours up to 3 hours earlier or later than what their employer required. Okay, so even a simple move like that, if you have flexibility, you can work from home. Sweden has tested out 6-hour work days. France moved to a 35-hour work week. Okay, so these are all ways of promoting what we know will work. Denmark, if you know anything about Denmark, which is the happiest country in the world, by the way, by many different measures. I love this idea that they have communal living. And so they live in community spaces where you have people from multi-generations living together, and they all take care of each other. So I was watching a video of a mother with 2 small children. She's a single mom, and so her girls live in this house with her, and they all take turns cooking. So they all cook for each other once a month. The kids make the food. They all share babysitting. They all look out for each other, and it's a way of the community coming together. So now I want to talk to you about what does it look like for you to flip the script, and for you to pay attention to what's going well in your life. Okay, this is what the work of positive psychology is all about. Generally, I think that when we think about psychology and the way that it used to be practiced, and I think in some ways still is that you're trying to get people from -10 to 0. Right? Again, kind of the pathogen model. You're trying to get rid of something, trying to get rid of these symptoms of anxiety, of depression. And positive psychology says, okay, well, yes, that's important. I mean, we need to be healthy and to be psychologically strong, but there's so much more on the other end. So we can figure out how to take people from 0 to +10 to be additive and not just to get rid of things. And so one way that we can do that is by engaging with our strengths. So many of you, I saw hands go up that you took the VIA survey, the Values in Action survey. That was developed by Chris Peterson and Marty Seligman. Marty Seligman is at the University of Pennsylvania. Chris Peterson was at the University of Michigan. He passed away several years ago, but he and Marty together began this important work in the late 1990s, and they really kind of started with a question, as much good research does, like, how do we promote good, strong, positive youth development and the qualities that we know make a good life. And so they studied youth development from around the country, from around the world. They also culled through many different religious and spiritual and sacred texts to find out culturally what are the things, like, is there a set of or a list, a taxonomy that this comes down to, a classification that we can pinpoint, and the answer is this is what they came up with, is the VIA. So there are 24 character strengths, and hopefully you were able to engage some with your strengths. What we know about strengths are that they're predictive of well-being. So what is well-being? Well, well-being is measured by life satisfaction and happiness. And well-being includes 5 things, and this is part of Marty Seligman's well-being theory. It's positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, PERMA. Okay, that's his model of well-being. And strengths can show up in any of those 5 parts of the well-being model. But one of the ways that it shows up the most is something that we'll talk about in a minute. So other directed strengths predict less depressive symptoms. So when you're connecting to people and a purpose that's greater than yourself, you will have less depressive symptoms. So we need to get out there and connect with each other. Other directed strengths, so I want to talk to you about that. So if you were to take the VIA, you're going to get a list of 24 character strengths, rank order from 1 to 24. And then some of those strengths that you will see are considered other directed strengths, and some of them are classified as individual strengths that are more self strengths. So, or head strengths, I will say. I'll throw one out there. Kindness and generosity. Is that another directed strength? Yes, kindness and generosity is another directed strength. Love of learning. Maybe you can use love of learning to engage with somebody else, but it maybe wouldn't necessarily be considered an other directed strength. Okay, spirituality, other directed strength. Appreciation of beauty and excellence, other directed strength. Citizenship and teamwork, other directed strength. It's about bringing people to leadership, other directed strength. Okay, so and we can also classify these according to heart strengths and head strengths. So an example of a head strength I just gave you one would be love of learning, or curiosity and interest in the world, because it's engaging a lot of our cognition. Whereas a heart strength would be capacity to love and be loved, because it strengthens our heart. So other directed strengths predict less depressive symptoms. And then also transcendent strengths, and they're down there at the bottom, provide a deep sense of purpose and connection to others. So these are hope, appreciation and beauty and excellence, gratitude, humor, and spirituality. But here's the thing, I wonder, I think so many of you probably did it when you saw your strengths and saw them rank ordered. For those of you who took the test, did any of you go to the bottom right away? Oh my gosh, some of you did. And you're like, oh, I cannot believe that that's number 24. How is that possible? Okay, that's the negativity bias. We all have it, right? We're like, what's wrong with me? But that. You know, what the VIA shows us is that you actually have all of these. These are your best assets. The ones that are at the top are your strongest. They're the ones that if I said to you, which one really defines you? There would be one that would come to mind. So you would have 5, but just because one came out as the number 1 came out as your number 1 doesn't mean that that's your top strength. You could have any in the top 5 that actually are the true you. So questions that we ask when I coach somebody around their strengths is, which strength truly defines you? I'll say, which strength gives you energy? That you find that when you engage with it, that time just stops, or that it rejuvenates you in ways that are replenishing. I sometimes ask, if I were to ask the people that are closest to you, if I were to show them this list, which one would they say truly defines you? So those are ways to begin thinking about and identifying the one that is the top one for you. And when you engage with your strengths, what you're doing is you are opening up. It's like the best gateway drug, okay? And it's free, and you have it. It's your asset. So you open up a pathway or a gateway to positive emotions. Okay, so positive emotions is the first of that well-being model. So I think this is interesting because we've talked about how a lot of self-care is about getting rid of, and if we use it more as a promotion, if we promote that and we actually engage with our strengths or do things when we're really going well, then these are the emotions that can come as a result of that. If you have studied biology or ethology, you would know that negative emotions, interestingly, have a specific action tendency that is associated with them. So when you feel it, you want to do something with it. So when you feel fear, what do you want to do?
Run.
You might want to run, okay? When you feel sad, cry. When you feel ashamed,
Hide.
hide, right? Okay, so there's a very specific action that's associated with negative emotions, which is why I think we engage in self-care sometimes, because we want to do something about these feelings that we have. Positive emotions don't have that. Positive emotions they broaden and they build, okay? So they broaden and they build and they give us access to so much more that can energize us. So this is what the upper schoolers at Agnes Irwin said when we went through this exercise of positive emotions, and we talked about how to get there. What would they do to get there? These are some of the things that they mentioned, which I thought was interesting. So here's the charge for today. And I see Jean standing there, which means I might be running out of time. So I want to make sure that you get this. If you take a picture of anything, take a picture of this. This is your takeaway today. Okay. So I'm going to say that we know that we can create living wills. I'm asking you to create a living well. Okay. So here are some things that you can do to create a living well. The first one is make a no list. And that means you're going to make a list of all the things that you're going to say no to. This is about you protecting yourself. Okay, so some of the things that you may choose to put on there are, I am not going to respond to email after 6 o'clock p.m. I'm not going to check my phone. That is on my no list. Okay, I am not going to have any technology at the table when I'm eating. I'm not going to eat and do something else at the same time. I'm just going to eat. Okay, so think about your no list. Build more low-stakes casual friendships. There's research out there, we're hearing about connecting. Actually, you can create, you can build on self-care by expanding your network through weak ties. If you look at diffusion studies, and you look at the way that kind of information spreads through communities, You can take kind of those small week, look at those small week levels, and actually they produce a greater systematic change. Fund a hobby or a passion. Okay, find something that you're interested in and put your money towards it. Avoid generosity burnout. So this is about protecting yourself. There is research from Adam Grant that shows that we can easily settle into what's called collaboration overload. So you're always saying yes. And then what happens is you become a selfless giver. And when people begin to know that you're a selfless giver, then guess who ends up with the most work? You, because people are coming to you and say, would you mind doing this? Would you mind, dropping this off? Would you mind making this call? Would you? And then all of a sudden your to-do list is, a page long. So protect your time. Savor your experiences. Don't give in to the busyness myth, okay, where we're all, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm so busy, okay? So just let it go, okay? We are all overworked, we're stressed, and there's a different way we can explain our well-being. Curate your social media. You follow people who send you good messages and send you good reminders. And then create positive mantras. Tell yourself things that will keep you centered during the day. And then last but not least, what I'll share is create habits. Okay, you want to create habits. And one thing that you can do that will be helpful when you think about self-care is you stack your habits. Okay, so that means that if you already have a habit or a routine, then think about just adding something to it. It'll make it easier. So if you already have a morning routine, maybe you make your coffee and you sit and you drink your coffee at your table, then maybe you want to add one more thing to that, since you're already doing it, that contributes to your self-care, like reading a book of poetry or writing in a journal. Okay, so stack your habits. Schedule it. Remember, you have to be deliberate and intentional. So look at your week or look at your day and say, what am I going to do today that will contribute to my self-care? And then make it a daily ritual. Okay, prioritize it and make it happen. So, am I totally out of time, Jean?
No.
No.
Okay, I'm going to do this one last thing because I think that it will help you walk away with a visual. So, if I hold up this orange, and we use this as our metaphor, and I ask you, if I were to squeeze this orange as hard as I can, and put pressure on it, and squeeze it, manipulate it, and kind of beat it up, okay? What will come out?
Juice.
What kind of juice?
Orange juice.
Orange juice will come out. So no matter how many times I squeeze it, no matter how many times I try and break it, no matter how much pressure I put on it, orange juice is going to come out. Why?
It's an orange.
It's what's on the inside. So now, let's say someone squeezes you. Okay, they squeeze you. They say something that's mean. You get a nasty email or a nasty text. They behave in ways that upset you. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And out of you comes anger, hatred, bitterness. And you say, why? Why did that come out? And what you might say is, well, it's the way that she talked to me. Or it's that thing that he did. It's what that person did that made that anger come out. But the truth is that what comes out is what's inside. Okay? What comes out is what's inside. You can't give away what you don't have. You can't give away. If I were to give you a bag of oranges, I have to have that bag of oranges first. Okay, so think about When you think about self-care, I know that we've all heard the idea of the oxygen mask coming down. You put yours on first before you can help somebody else. It's the same idea. You want to give love to someone, you've got to have it inside. And you want to give your very best to your partner, you've got to be curating and promoting the very best within you. And that's what self-care is truly about, because it leads to self-love. So I'm going to leave you with that and turn it over, back over to Jean, who will moderate the end of our discussion. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you so very much. You have to come over here next to me. I'm a people person. Thank you so very much. We'll get out of the sun. But I wanted to take this opportunity to get a little bit more of her. She's just awesome. And I learned more about myself and what I need not to do, Heidi. We are no longer staying at work until 8 o'clock at night. So this time we're going to open the doors for you to ask the questions that you want the answers to today that I cannot answer, but Elizabeth can. So we have to share the mic, and I will run to you, and I'll run back to Elizabeth. Questions?
Yes, I can talk.
I hear you.
I project. So, you said about, the self-sufficient person won't live as long. What about introverts? What about introversion? And now, you talked about the millennial culture. Introverts are really doing well in their professions because programmers and things like that, there's a lot of professions now in the tech industry that require that introversion. What about them?
So is it a misnomer to think that introverts do not connect? I guess that's my question back. Because I think that they do.
They do.
just connect in different ways, right? So I would argue that as an extrovert, I find energy by being in a group and by being at a party and walking around and mingling. An introvert might not. It might look different because an introvert may choose just that one person to talk to, but may still be connecting in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on the scarcity complex?
Yeah, so I think that if you want to know more about the scarcity complex, you should read Brene Brown. She's an incredible researcher in Houston. She's written several books. The one that I read is called Daring Greatly. Great book, but she's written a bunch of others, and she has tons of TED Talks. But basically, the scarcity complex is about not having enough and not being enough. So you always feel like you're waking up trying to kind of get more of it because you feel like it's going away all the time. So I think that it's potentially more damaging for women than for men because we're better multitaskers and because we're caregivers most of the time. And so so in some ways we think that there is a scarcity of time, a scarcity of resources, and that we kind of have to wake up kind of pulling at it all the time. Yes.
Being a baby boomer.
I wouldn't have known. I think you're lying.
How do you, and you came from a family of maybes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe you might,
Yes.
maybe you won't. So how do you find yourself, pulling yourself out of that years of always, do I deserve this, do I not? Am I being selfish? Is this being indulgent?
Mm-hmm.
Being, many generations away from people now who feel like, yeah, I work hard, I make my own money. Yes, I'll take this trip. Yes, I'll buy those $500 shoes.
As a baby boomer, how do you become
I don't
better?
want to be that way, but I'm just saying how you bring yourself to maybe a more self-accepting.
Well, I think you mentioned the first step, which is self-awareness, and realizing that you have those attitudes and those mindsets towards self-care. That's the first step, is realizing that, having those conversations, being able to talk about it, and then using, so one way that we know in psychological science or developmental psychology that when we want to increase or build a new skill, we talk about self-efficacy. Okay, so I think it's about self-efficacy, and when you talk about that, you're talking about a couple of different things. You're talking about building that by having vicarious experiences. So living through somebody else's experience and then saying, wow, that's amazing, I want to do that. I want to take that trip, or I want to be going to the gym every day, whatever it might be. The other is to have positive role models, so people that you can identify to say, their messages are positive, or ones that I, want to become more aware of, or I want to kind of do some of the things that they're doing. And then having mentors as well is another way of building self-efficacy. So perhaps thinking about some of those things, but I think the most important thing is what you mentioned, which is just being aware that times have changed, our world looks very different, and it's okay, accepting, giving yourself permission to take care of yourself.
One question? Last question, Jane?
There was one other thing. Hi.
I actually, the question about building those low-stake friendships, what exactly does that look like?
Yeah, so those are the weak ties. The question was, what does it look like to build low-stake friendships? It means, I think that another way to think about it is networking. So find every opportunity to connect with a wide range of people. So you go to a fitness class, befriend the person who's in that class that you see quite often. You go to the coffee shop and you always have the same barista, get to know that person. And through developing those weak ties, you actually create more positive pathways that lead to stronger connections in the long run that lead to your well-being. And so I think the idea too is that they're fortifying in that, when you have a couple of strong connections, then when those connections, when something happens to those connections, it can leave you feeling pretty lonely. If you have more weak ties and casual friendships, then it helps you become connected in new and novel ways, but also have more people just in your life.
I'm just curious, can you paint us a picture of your methods of self-care?
Oh.
Because you seem like a really busy.
I am very busy. Well, my husband's in the room and my sisters are in the room, so they're going to keep me honest. One way that I prioritize self-care is that I wake up every day, and the first thing that I do is I make a pot of coffee, because I love coffee. I love the smell of it, and again, that's savoring, like the smell of it, the process of making it I love. And then typically what I'll do is I will find 10 minutes to meditate, and I use an app called Calm. It's a great app. You like Calm? Yeah, good. Headspace is another. Headspace is a great app too, but Calm I like just because you can, it's a wide variety, and then they have a daily meditation every day, so you can just click on it. It's 10 minutes, and it's just a moment to kind of center yourself. And then I will drink that fabulous cup of coffee at my table while reading something inspirational. And so sometimes that will be the Bible, and sometimes that will be the Bhagavad Gita, and sometimes it'll be a book of poetry, but something inspirational. And then I set about my self-care daily routines. But during the day as well, and we really didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about this, but when you need a break during the day, because we all need them, where you just feel like your energy needs to pivot in some way, try and find the activity that connects to your strengths, because it's almost like an exponential effect on your mood. So I know one of my top strengths is appreciation of beauty and excellence. So if I go for a walk outside in nature, that it's an instant boost. So sometimes I will leave the lower school building, and I will just go for a walk. And walk and look at the trees, and look at the birds. You notice I didn't say I'm walking and looking at my phone, but I know that that's an instant boost for me, and so sometimes I will do that as part of my routine as well. So I think it's important to think about what your habits look like, how you can stack them, and then ways in which they can connect to your strengths. One last question? Okay.
I appreciated your advice to curate our social media to find resources that give us positive feedback. What's your advice on wading through the rest of the social media? I read in recent years that people who spend more time on Facebook are actually more depressed.
Yes, that's
because
correct.
They see everyone else's great trip that we're not on, or their grandchildren that you don't have, or whatever. So what's your advice for dealing with all of that?
Yeah, I think it's complicated, and it is a way to stay connected. So some people choose to be on social media because it connects them to people that they wouldn't, those weak ties that you wouldn't necessarily see otherwise. But my suggestion would be to unfollow. Unfollow, hide things, and truly look at your page as opening up a newspaper every day. What are the things that you want to see? And so there are people who are very close to me in my family that I've unfollowed. They don't maybe know that I've unfollowed them, but I have, because it's not something that I want to be looking at every day. So, okay.
Once again, thank you so very much. Let all of us just stand up and give her a cheer. She was awesome. Do not go away, because we need at least 10 more minutes of your time. Elizabeth, because you're such a wonderful person and we have so much in common, gratitude, spirituality, this is just a token of our love from Harcum to you.
Thank you so much.
Now we're going to ask you to do just a little bit more work. We're going to ask that you select a door prize for us. Hold this.
Kara Eudicious.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. You have a very, very nice gift. And I hope you love reading. I know that you do. Because you do. So what you have the book that Elizabeth is a contributor to. So I'm sorry I spoiled the fun.
On the birdhouse.
How to live a full life.
Before you leave, I want to once again thank each and every one of you for coming. And I also want you to find, you're going to find something in your program. You look and find what that something is, and we ask that you complete that form and give it to us before you leave. The final thing that I want to say to you is that our very last series for this year is going to be April 2nd, 2020 at 4 p.m. in this room, and the topic is going to be Earth Care and Sustainability. So I know I've seen faces more than once, more than twice. Some people have actually attended all 3 lecture series, and I know you're coming back. So once again, we love you, we appreciate you, and thank you so very much for coming. And once again, thank you so very much, Elizabeth. Have a